The Agricultural Adjustment Act, also known as the AAA, was a federal law passed in 1933 under Roosevelt's New Deal. It was the first farm bill in the U.S. The act gave farmers subsidies for limiting their production, which was mandatory for them to do. Subsidies are direct or indirect payment to individuals or firms from the government. By limiting overproduction, crop prices were able to rise. The law was passed in Roosevelt's first 100 days of office and was supported by many people because most farmers could not afford not to take money from the government. The Agricultural Adjustment Act was especially supported in Georgia, where it had unanimous support from both Georgia senators and representatives. Next slide. The goal of the Agricultural Adjustment Act was to keep the farmers afloat. The government did this by telling farmers to limit the amount of crops they planted. After doing this, the farmers would receive a subsidy from the government. The subsidies were paid for by a tax on the companies that processed the crops. This is a picture of a group of farmers in 1933. Next slide. Farmers also had to destroy existing crops and kill livestock. However, the food was not wasted. The food was given to unemployed families. Nothing went to waste. Since piglets were too small for food, they were made into fertilizer and grease. Over 6 million pigs were killed in this operation. Furthermore, only landowners saw benefits from the Agricultural Adjustment Act, so most African Americans continued to suffer through this time. This is a picture of some pigs that were going to be slaughtered. Next slide. This political cartoon is called the Nation's Champion Recovery Producer and is about the Agricultural Adjustment Act. It was created by Joseph Lee Parrish in 1935. The cow symbolizes the Agricultural Adjustment Act. The milk cans represent the success of the program. The first can is labeled Increased Farm Income, and the middle one is labeled Business and Industrial Gains through Reestablishment of Agriculture's Purchasing Power, because that is what the program did. The cow is eating the processing tax used to help pay the farmers, which is what paid for the AAA. The short man represents the Supreme Court and is saying, "I want her killed so we won't have to feed her." Next slide. In 1936, the Agricultural Adjustment Act was ruled as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court stated that because of the 10th Amendment, regulating and controlling agriculture was a state problem, not a federal one. This happened in the court case United States v. Butler, where the AAA was ruled as unconstitutional by a 6-3 vote. Justice Owen J. Roberts wrote on the court's behalf, "The act invades the reserved rights of the states. It is a statutory plan to regulate and control agricultural production, a matter beyond the powers delegated to the federal government. The tax, the appropriation of the funds raised, and the direction for their disbursement are but parts of the plan. They are but means to an unconstitutional end." Although the Agricultural Adjustment Act was ruled unconstitutional, this was not the end. Next slide. Congress passed a second Agricultural Adjustment Act in 1938. This act was just like the 1933 Act. However, farmers now got the option on whether or not they wanted to limit their production to half, receive a subsidy, or if they would like to farm their entire farm. The new act also introduced crop insurance. Crop insurance paid subsidies from general tax revenues instead of taxes on producers. Next slide. This is President Roosevelt's statement on the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938. It's really long, so I'm just going to summarize it. Roosevelt first speaks about how because they passed the Agricultural Adjustment Act, they were taking a new and untrod path. He states that progress has been made since the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933 was in effect. Through the government's experiences, they were able to learn what works best for the farmers and the nation. Roosevelt also says that the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938 is historic legislation due to representing winning a battle for underlying farm policy. The act wasn't perfection, but it would help many people. Lastly, FDR says that the new and improved AAA will not involve a greater annual cost.